CNN, in my view, should be the place where both sides can watch.
And I don't think that you can say that CNN is anything but fair. I mean, look at that. We covered President Biden's exit from the race very closely, the pressure on him to get out. And I feel like I can speak with authority on this. I'm from Alabama. I'm from a very red state. I have a very conservative family, a lot of them who are Trump voters. They watch my show every night, and I think they know that they can trust me, that, you know, we call bullshit on every side.
If you thought the tension between Kaitlan Collins and Bill Maher had calmed down, think again. Kaitlan seems determined to single-handedly challenge conservative values, even if it means risking her own reputation. But Bill Maher isn't backing down either. In my last video, I broke down the fiery history behind this clash, and today, I'm diving into the latest shots fired from both sides, along with the reactions that are sparking even more conversation. Sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss content like this.
I'm Kaitlan Collins. I'm inside the East Wing of the White House right now, and if you look over my left shoulder, you can see the portrait of President Barack Obama. That, of course, was his presidential portrait that was unveiled a few years ago and installed here at the White House. One question that we had coming in was whether or not that portrait would remain up. We've seen Trump removing the portraits of his former officials at the Pentagon, like General Mark Milley and his former Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper. But so far, all the portraits in the East Wing of the White House still appear to be up.
Apparently, Kaitlan Collins and CNN have nothing better to do than bash Trump and take jabs at people like Bill Maher.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to challenge you on one of the statements that you made in the tail end of the campaign in the midterms. That
here we go.
If you don't mind, Mr. President, that this caravan was an invasion. As you know, Mr. President,
I consider it to be an invasion.
As you know, Mr. President, the caravan was not an invasion. It's a group of migrants moving up from Central America towards the border with the U.S.
Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate it.
Why did you characterize it as such?
Because I consider it an invasion. You and I have a difference of opinion.
I don't know about you, but I definitely see some similarities there. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. Knowing Kaitlan Collins, there's no way they covered those White House portraits just for fun. The woke mob doesn't do anything by accident. Every move, every second, every word is calculated, especially when it's about taking down Trump and derailing the Republican agenda. Let's be honest, Kaitlan was probably checking to see if Obama's portrait was still hanging, just so she could set Trump up for another round of social media backlash. I mean, why else would Trump remove portraits of some former presidents but leave Obama's untouched? Seems a bit suspicious, right? This is exactly why Bill Maher questioned her objectivity in reporting the news, because she always seems to be more of a spokesperson for Kamala Harris than a neutral reporter. Watch this.
What do you think about the fact that Kamala doesn't talk to the press? In a way, I feel like it's more insulting than what Trump does. And Trump says you're the enemy of the people, which is pretty bad. What she's kind of saying is, I don't need you. I'm not talking to you. You don't matter. You're not relevant anymore. To me, that's even worse than I hate you. It's like, I don't think about you.
I don't know if it's worse than denigrating the press on a daily basis, which is what Donald Trump did. I mean, I covered him in the White House every day as a correspondent.
See what I mean? The question was simple. Why did Kamala Harris refuse to talk to the press in the lead up to the presidential election? But somehow, Kaitlan Collins managed to twist the narrative and drag Donald Trump into the conversation. A classic move. Instead of addressing why the sitting vice president was dodging the media like it was a landmine, Kaitlan used Trump as a convenient distraction. It's the oldest trick in the CNN playbook. When in doubt, blame Trump. Forget holding leaders accountable, forget asking the tough questions. Just pivot to Trump and hope no one notices the dodge. But trust Bill Maher to notice and call them out. Honestly, can you even blame Trump for calling CNN the enemy of the people? When a so-called journalist can't answer a simple question without taking a detour to bash Trump, that's not journalism. That's activism in disguise. It's biased, dishonest, and exactly why so many people don't trust mainstream media anymore. This wasn't about seeking the truth. It was about running interference for Kamala Harris. And the sad part is, CNN thinks no one is smart enough to notice, but Maher sees it clearly and calls it out every time.
They were just gushing about how great a speech it was. And I think she did fine. I didn't think it was as good as they were making it out to be. It does look like tokenism. It's kind of like the same as The View.
I don't think that you can say that CNN is anything but fair. Everyone who was speaking last night, it's not like they were all Democrats. I mean, Dana Bash, Jake Tapper, Abby Phillip.
They come across
giving
that way.
Analysis.
They come across that way. In a moment like that, it was like 5-1.
Few not afraid to call out bias. even when it's coming from his own side. Honestly, that comparison had me laughing. Of all the talk shows in America, Ma puts CNN. He's one of the men on the same level as The View. That's not just a burn. That's a 5-alarm roast. Think about it for a second. The View is basically daytime TV's Hot Mess Express, where facts take a back seat and shouting matches are mistaken for meaningful debate. And Ma's out here saying, yeah, CNN's about that level now. Brutal, right? But is he wrong? When CNN's reporting is full of bias, spin, and emotional meltdowns, just like The View. Maybe it's time they embrace the comparison. At least The View admits it's just opinion-driven drama. CNN still clings to the illusion of journalism, but when you're serving up gossip and partisan rants, is there really a difference? Ma didn't just throw shade, he tossed the whole tree. And CNN? They're still pretending it's sunny outside. You know who else threw the whole tree? The current border czar, Tom Homan.
So how many days after Trump is sworn in before this effort to carry out the mass deportations begins? I know you said it starts on day one, but after how many days will we actually start to see that happening?
Day one.
I love that slight dramatic pause from Tom Homan before he dropped the hammer. It was like he knew Kaitlan Collins was about to ask that question and had his answer locked, loaded, and ready to fire. Honestly, it felt like he'd been waiting for that exact moment because, let's be real, everyone saw that question coming from a mile away. Woke journalists are as predictable as a sunset. You know it's coming. You just don't know how many dramatic clouds they'll throw in for effect. And Kaitlan? She walked right into it. It's almost like these journalists follow the same tired playbook. Find a conservative, ask a gotcha question, and hope they fumble. But Homan wasn't just ready, he was 3 steps ahead. That pause wasn't hesitation. It was the calm before the storm. He let Kaitlan think she had the upper hand just before flipping the script. And that's what makes it so satisfying. Watching the predictable media narrative crash and burn when it's confronted with actual facts and logic. Priceless. But the best part was still to come.
On this effort overall, in terms of what you believe you need, and you're obviously deeply familiar with how this works and what's ahead of you, you had previously said about $86 billion was the minimum this project will cost. Do you have a better estimate now as you've been developing your plan?
I never said 86 billion. That was a CNN reporter that said 86 billion.
Woo, another hammer blow for the so-called border czar. Did you catch how CNN plays the misinformation game? First, they throw out a narrative, then, like clockwork, they frame it as if it's coming straight from Trump's camp. Classic bait and switch. Tom Homan never mentioned that $86 billion figure CNN did. Yet, here comes Kaitlan tossing out a question about that exact number, pretending it came from Homan himself. It's the media equivalent of planting evidence and then acting shocked when they discover it. This is how the game is played. CNN floats a figure into the public discourse, lets it simmer, and then corners conservatives with it as if it's universally accepted fact. And if you dare push back, suddenly you're the one spreading misinformation. It's manipulative, it's dishonest, and honestly, it's getting old. But Homan, he wasn't having it. He saw the trap coming and dismantled it piece by piece. And that's the beauty of it. Watching CNN's narrative fall apart when confronted with actual facts is like watching a magician get caught palming cards. Awkward, painful, and utterly satisfying.
But I'll say this, 86 billion, I mean, what price you put on the young women that have been murdered and raped in this country? What price you put on, the lives of all these little girls that, there's numerous cases. What price you put on national security? Because we know a record number of people on terrorist watch that's been called on the southern border. We also know there's over 2.2 million gotaways. How many of them came from countries sponsoring terror? What price you put on the thousands of angel moms and dads who their children were buried by their parents because their children were killed by someone that's not supposed to be here.
Aside from Bill Maher, Tom Homan is easily my favorite person right now. I can't get enough of the verbal smackdowns he's handing out to Kaitlan Collins. It's like watching a pro in action. Instead of focusing on real solutions to the border crisis, Kaitlan's more concerned with the money allocated for the operation. But here's the catch. She's not digging into the numbers because she genuinely cares about how the funds are being used. She's probably just fishing for a way to blame the Trump administration for wasting taxpayer dollars. And that ties right back to what I mentioned earlier in the video, Kaitlan snooping around the White House portraits. Every move from the woke mob is carefully calculated, designed to catch people off guard and frame the narrative in their favor. It's never about the truth. It's about setting traps, twisting facts, and hoping no one notices. But with people like Homan delivering blow after blow, it's getting harder for them to keep up the act. The more they push, the more obvious their game becomes. And trust me, people are starting to notice. As for Tom Homan, he's not done yet.
Well, let me say this. This would be an expensive operation, but in the long run, it would be a huge tax savings on the American people, because right now they're spending billions of dollars on free airline tickets, free hotel rooms, free medical care. Not talking about our education system, our trauma and hospitals, and sir, that's in perpetuity. And
that's the kind of honesty Americans have come to respect about the Trump administration. No smoke, no mirrors, just straight talk. Tom Homan didn't dodge the facts. He openly acknowledged that the border operation is expensive, even admitting he didn't have the exact figure on hand. That's called transparency, and it's refreshing to hear someone say, yeah, it's costly, but we're doing what needs to be done. Now, compare that to the Biden administration, where everything feels like a magic trick. They'll juggle numbers, twist narratives, and dodge questions like it's an Olympic sport. Ask them about costs, and you get a word salad about equity and climate initiatives. Ask about policy failures, and they point fingers at the previous administration. It's a masterclass in misdirection, saying a lot without actually saying anything. But here's the thing. Americans are tired of the political tap dance. They want real answers, not rehearsed talking points. That's why people like Homan stand out. He's not there to spin a narrative. He's there to tell the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. And that kind of honesty, it's rare. That's exactly why more people are tuning out the noise and focusing on the facts.
There are different estimates of how many undocumented immigrants are in the country and you have said everyone is on the table. If it's 11 million people and what that number looks like, what is your goal over the 4 years of the total number of people that you would like to? If you have the number of beds that you would like, if you have the number of ICE deportation officers and others that can help you with that, what is your ultimate number of that deportation that you would like to see when you're done with your job?
I don't have a number. We want to arrest as many people as we can that are in the country illegally, again, based on prioritization. We want to arrest every criminal, every gang member that's here illegally, that's a public safety threat. We want to arrest every fugitive, those who had due process at great taxpayer expense, and have an ordered deportation but didn't leave and became a fugitive. We got over 1.5 million of those. And look, we got millions of people here illegally. I've said if you're here illegally, you're not off the table. I mean, it's a violation of law. It's a crime to enter this country illegally.
Honestly, I'm struggling to understand Kaitlan's obsession with numbers. It's like she thinks if she throws out enough figures, she'll somehow uncover a grand conspiracy. But Tom Homan keeps it simple. His job is to arrest as many illegal migrants as possible. That's the mission, end of story. But somehow, that straightforward answer doesn't click with Kaitlan. She's too busy chasing numbers, as if statistics matter more than real results. Maybe it's because Kaitlan isn't actually interested in facts. She's looking for a gotcha moment. If Homan had given her a concrete number, she probably would have twisted it into some headline about cruelty or inefficiency. Since she didn't get that, she just kept circling back, like a dog chasing its own tail. What she doesn't get is that border security isn't about hitting a quota. It's about enforcing the law and keeping Americans safe. But that's the thing with woke journalists, they care more about optics than outcomes. They want headlines, not solutions. And when someone like Homan refuses to play their numbers game, they just can't handle it. Here's another smug journalist trying to corner Tom Homan. Spoiler alert, it doesn't end well.
This administration's turned this world upside down, so now I'm being attacked, right? I got death threats. My family's not even living in my home right now. So all of a sudden, the guys who want to enforce the law are the bad guys. The guys who break the law are the victims. And for those mayors and those governors who say they're going to stop ICE from doing their job, stop me from doing this job, Listen to the Laken Riley tape. President Trump has made it clear. We're going to prioritize public safety threats and national security threats right out of the gate because they pose the most danger to this country. What governor or mayor doesn't want public safety threats and national security threats out of their neighborhoods, out of their communities? That's your number one responsibility.
The number one responsibility of any government is to prioritize the safety and security of its own citizens before considering the interests of foreign nationals. That's just common sense. But under the Biden administration, it feels like everything's been flipped upside down. They've made it clear that protecting foreign nationals takes precedence, even if it means compromising the safety of everyday Americans. It's a dangerous, backwards approach that leaves communities vulnerable while virtue signaling to the world. And the worst part? Even though they're out of office, they're still fighting against the system. They're not stepping aside or letting law enforcement do its job. No, they're actively working to block ICE through legal threats, lawsuits, and endless bureaucratic red tape. It's almost as if they're more concerned about shielding illegal migrants than protecting American neighborhoods. Meanwhile, agencies like ICE are stuck in the middle, trying to enforce the law while dodging political landmines. The Biden administration didn't just turn a blind eye. They're actively tying the hands of those sworn to uphold border security. It's reckless, it's dangerous, and it's proof that their priorities are completely out of line with what Americans actually want and need. This is why Americans didn't vote for Kamala Harris.
Harris would be the first woman president, first black woman president, and first Asian president. But I don't vote for who will be the first. I vote for who will win. And for whatever reason, Harris has never been popular. You can count the number of delegates she won in the 2020 primaries on one hand, as long as that hand has no fingers. In 3 years as vice president, she's been quieter than an electric car. And it's not fair that she's not popular. She's intelligent and accomplished, and in fact was put in charge of the border. And look at how... Okay, bad example.
Bill Maher is absolutely right. The Democrats played political games with our borders when they were in power, turning national security into a pawn for their agenda. Millions of illegal immigrants were allowed to flood into the country without proper vetting. And what happened next? Many of them became a threat to communities, contributing to rising crime and straining public resources. The safety and well-being of American citizens were pushed aside, all in the name of political correctness and the open border fantasy. But did Kaitlan Collins and her media allies hold them accountable? Not for a second. There wasn't a single tough question, no hard-hitting expose, and no calls for responsibility. The media turned a blind eye, playing defense for the administration instead of doing their job. If this had happened under a conservative administration, the outrage would have been endless. But because it fit their political narrative, silence was the strategy. That's the hypocrisy we're dealing with. They preach compassion, but it's selective. They talk about justice, but it's conditional. And while they're busy covering for failed policies, it's the American people who end up paying the price.
What media are you talking about that's anti-Trump?
You're not familiar with the anti-Trump media?
You're not familiar with the fact that you guys control for everything
of
from
all
podcasts?
the things I've heard you say out here, that might be the nuttiest.
Scott,
believe me, there's plenty of anti-Trump.
It seems Julie Rinsky has been living under a rock, or maybe she's just choosing to ignore the obvious. It's no secret that the media landscape was overwhelmingly stacked against Donald Trump. Yet, Rinsky confidently points to Fox News and Joe Rogan as the supposed media powerhouses in Trump's corner. Sure, they have influence, but let's not pretend that two voices can outweigh an entire media ecosystem pushing pro-Biden narratives. From CNN and MSNBC to the New York Times and the Washington Post, the number of outlets supporting Biden during the election was overwhelming. Social media giants weren't exactly neutral either, with algorithmic decisions and content moderation working in Biden's favor. When you add all this up, Rinsky's claim falls apart faster than a house of cards in a windstorm. It's not just a misjudgment. It's a deliberate distortion of reality. Anyone paying attention can easily see through the facade.
CNN, in my view, should be the place where both sides can watch.
And I don't think that you can say that CNN is anything but fair. I mean, look at that. We covered President Biden's exit from the race very closely, the pressure on him to get out. And I feel like I can speak with authority on this. I'm from Alabama. I'm from a very red state. I have a very conservative family, a lot of them who are Trump voters. they watch my show every night, and I think they know that they can trust me, that, we call bullshit on every side.
Notice how Kaitlan conveniently mentions her family's Republican background without disclosing her own political leanings. Now, it wouldn't be an issue if she identified as a Democrat. Everyone's entitled to their views. But when you're in a position that demands objectivity, transparency becomes essential. Viewers deserve to know whether personal biases are influencing the narrative. Journalism should be about facts, not feelings, ideologies, or political allegiances. If Kaitlan wants to maintain her credibility, she needs to commit to impartiality and set aside any personal convictions. Otherwise, her reporting risks becoming more of a partisan monologue than objective journalism. Let's be real, trust in the media is already fragile. The least she can do is be upfront, fair, and focused on the facts. Transparency isn't just a virtue, it's a responsibility. And with that, we wrap up today's episode. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our uploads. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.